Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing. We are finally out in the garden. It's the first week of April. We've had a pretty nasty winter, a pretty nasty March, or we'd have been out doing some of these jobs a couple of weeks ago. As I said, we're out in the garden today, first week of April. Um, we've had some nasty ice storms. We've had rain. We've had snow. We've had a little bit of everything in the last couple of weeks. But we are going to get to our spring jobs, or it's going to be too late to do them easily. So one of the first spring jobs we do is cutting things back, cutting back perennials. We tend to lead the perennials standing for the winter, as you can see sort of here behind me. This is a big asparagus that we use as an ornamental. We plant it with canna lilies and bananas and things like that around it. Makes a nice contrast. But it's got to go for the new shoots to start. Right behind it, we're going to look at a group 3 clematis. And we're going to look at a little something else in another part of the garden. But at this time of the year, now is the time to get out in the garden, get going. Like I say, we're probably a little late. We actually try to do these jobs sort of around mid-March. Why we do that is I like to get out in the garden, and if I have to walk around in the garden, I want to do it before bulbs come up too much, and while the ground is still a bit frozen. So we were below zero last night. We are on very well-drained soil that water does not sit around on. I can walk in the garden today and not leave footprints. If you have a heavier soil, a heavy clay soil, heavy loam soil, you need to be very careful about being out in the garden in this time of the year because your boots can sink in and you can really compact the soil. So if you have that kind of issue, great if you can get your spring cleanup and things done before the ground thaws, and that way you're walking on frozen ground. You're not digging holes or anything, so it's a really good way to do it and a good time to do that. You're not damaging anything. If you look around, and you'll see it in a couple of minutes, there are lots of snowdrops in that right now. Our early crocus are starting. Our hellebores are starting to bloom. Over the next 3 weeks, the garden is going to be covered in thousands of bulbs. So we need to get these cleanup jobs done before we hit that stage, or it gets really difficult in the garden. So we're going to come right in here real quick. Remember that most perennials are herbaceous. And what that means is they die to the ground and only the root stays alive. I might want to turn that on. Only the root stays alive. So pretty much everything above ground on most perennials is dead. So we're going to come into this asparagus because it's a good example. And we really are just going to take the stems right out at ground level. And that's it. Very simple. Now, these are big pieces of debris, so they're going to go on the compost pile. If we were doing it with smaller things, all those twigs would just stay in the garden and become our mulch layer. So we'll get rid of that. And then we'll come into the group 3 clematis. You might need to turn that, Laura. The group 3 clematis. You okay? So, this is a clematis recta. It's what's called a group 3. It's a small flowered species. The group 3 clematis put on all kinds of new growth every year and then bloom on that new growth. So you don't get spring bloom. You don't get early summer bloom. You get midsummer bloom on. With that type, Anything that grows lots of growth and then flowers on the clematis, you take them right down to the ground basically, or maybe a foot off the ground. This guy, he dies to the ground. So we very simply cut all the stems back, and it will come fresh from the bottom extremely quickly. By early summer, it'll be at the top of this obelisk, start to bloom, and just be a fantastic cascade of white flowers for the season. Now, with this little stuff, I don't waste time going to the compost with it. We'll just chop it up into smaller pieces and leave it in the garden. It breaks down very quickly. The perennials, when they come up, will cover over it, and it, like I said, becomes our mulch layer. We don't put mulch down on the beds anymore. We just continually build up the mulch layer with leaves in the fall, compost where we feel we need it, the cut stems of everything that we take off in the spring all just stay in the garden. And that builds up a layer like a woodland layer where everything just sort of hits the ground and decomposes there. And you get a beautiful surface layer with not a lot of bare soil showing. If you have bare soil showing, you're going to get weeds. So you don't want that. So where the garden isn't covered by plants, and you'll see that as this garden progresses, there will be no soil seen. If there are spaces, make sure you've got a mulch layer in there. If you need to add a bit of shredded mulch, shredded bark mulch, pine, fir, cedar, hemlock, doesn't really matter. A few handfuls of shredded bark in areas where there is bare soil will keep the weeds down, keep the moisture in. Otherwise, this mulch layer that we try not to disturb does that for us. Yep.
What about the overwintering insects in the hollow stem?
You know what? There are some things like that. Here's a stem here. You can see it is a hollow stem. There could be some little critters in there. Hard to say. But you know what? Even if I just cut it into pieces and leave it in the garden, 90% of them are going to still be there if they are needed. Now, as far as cutting things back, if I look at the base of this clematis, I can see that there are holes in those stems. And if there are overwintering insects, they're probably still in there. If not, they're in the stems that I just left in the garden, so they're going to be there. Now, often you hear the meme that goes around that says, don't clean up your garden until it's consistently 10 degrees. If we did that, it would be a crazy mess. What you got to look for is plants that have those hollow stems. Could be a good plant for hosting beneficial insects over the winter. Don't cut them back, but cut everything else back. And we're going to look at that in a second. But if I thought that these phlox stems over here were going to be good for beneficial insects, then I would leave them. And also what you can do is, because they're way back in the border, I could leave them just at the height they are. All this is going to grow up, and the phlox is going to grow up around those dead stems, and in a few weeks you're not going to see them anymore. So you can look at it that way. So if you know that there's plants that overwintering insects might use, leave them a bit longer. Cut them back a little bit later. But clean up the junk that you know is not going to be used that way. So we're going to move over into the garden here a little bit. And we're going to look at a few things here very quickly, because we have talked about them before. Now is the time you want to get, and even like I say, we're a little behind. We want to get the old foliage off the hellebores. You can see our hellebores are coming into bloom, but we have the remnants of last year's stems here. So we want to get rid of those. Ideally, we'd want to get rid of those before the hellebores bloom, but we just couldn't do it this year. So we'll go in and get rid of that foliage, cleans them up, makes them look a lot better. Odds are they don't have hollow stems or anything, so chances are there's nothing overwintering in those stems. But cleaning it up, you can see the flowers better. Other early blooming perennials like Epimedium right here is going to be in bloom in a couple of weeks. Same thing. We want to cut them right down to the ground. Even if they're holding some of their old evergreen foliage, you just cut them down, let it all come fresh. Now, what I really wanted to talk about this morning was what's happened here on this shrub. This is a Carolina allspice. Obviously has very tasty bark because our rabbits this year were voracious and have attacked these things like crazy. You can see how high the snow was in the garden because the rabbits were able to get up here almost 4 feet off the ground and eat the bark. We've always had a little bit of rabbit nibbling every year, but this year has been exceptional, just absolutely crazy. So you can see when you get a shrub that's in this condition, if you look at a stem, you can see that they have peeled the bark right off all the way around the stem. Now what that means is that they have eaten into the vascular tissues that allows water to move up and down the stem. That means the top of this shrub will be dead. It may start to leaf out, but it won't be able to sustain itself. So what we have to do now is go in and we're just going to rejuvenate this shrub right from the ground up. So we just go right down to the bottom, and really every stem has been chewed. So we're just going to go down to soil level or pretty close to it. And we're just going to take those stems right out. Whoop. We'll take those stems right out. You can see that they have completely stripped that of anything good. That now is either kindling, or in a couple of weeks, I'm going to show you what to do with all these cut branches. So we'll just have to go in and just keep continually cutting out all these stems. Now, the nice thing is that even though we're going to lose some height in the garden first thing in the spring, what's going to happen is usually when this happens, the roots are good and healthy. They're strong. They got lots of food down there. They put all that nutrients and all their energy into growing new stems. So this should come back like crazy this year and grow back very quickly into a nice shrub again. So don't panic that your shrubs have died, because 90% of the time they will be fine. Now, it's a bit away in the garden, so I can't really show it to you, but we had a young hemlock tree that was completely girdled of the bark again, like these guys were. And conifers probably aren't going to come back from that, unfortunately. So we will have lost that hemlock tree to the rabbits. It might sprout from the base. Probably not, but it's possible. So we will have a couple of losses from shrubs, but things like the allspice here, some of our dogwoods, all will get cut down to the ground and come back fresh from the base, usually with increased vigor, and turn into some really beautiful shrubs again. So all is not lost, but we're going to lose a little bit of shrubbiness for the first thing in the spring. Any questions today, Laura?
No questions. Number of comments wishing you a happy birthday.
Oh, yes, it is my birthday today, so there we go. And how are we celebrating it? Standing out in the garden at -1, freezing. Anyway, no worries.
With the damage from the ice storm, what should people be doing in terms of pruning to?
Yeah, ice storm damage. We just suffered a week ago a pretty wicked ice storm in our area and places further north. And there is a lot of broken branches and things around. We actually lost a couple of big branches off some of our trees as well. What you need to do when you're looking at repairing that damage, have I got something that I could demonstrate? Yeah, you know what? We'll go to this apple tree here. So here's a branch we just cut off last year just because we needed to get rid of some lower branches. So if you can imagine, let's say this branch broke and is laying here needing to be removed from the tree. The most important part when you're taking a branch off is you don't want to disturb this little ring of tissue here where the branch meets the trunk. That's called the branch collar. And if it peels off, if the bark peels off, it's very hard for that to recover and be a nice clean cut. If you look over here, you'll see on this pagoda dogwood where I've taken branches off in the past. And when you take them off, you never cut into the branch collar bark because that's sort of like scab tissue that's going to cover over the wound. You leave a tiny bit of a stump on that branch, and then the branch collar will heal itself over. Now, if you've got damages, what you want to do is before you just go and cut this branch from the top down, you need to cut up from the bottom so you detach this bark that's coming off the broken piece from the bark that is on the trunk. If you cut here and there's still weight, that branch is going to drop and it's going to peel that bark right down. That is a really, really hard thing for the tree to repair easily. Then it allows insects and diseases to get into where that bark's been peeled off. So before you just go and cut broken branches off, just as if you were pruning, you make a vertical cut from the bottom and then cut outside of it to take the branch off, and then you can go back and clean that stump off a little closer to the trunk so the branch collar can heal around it. But you always want to make sure that you're breaking that sort of bark seal there so it doesn't just peel all the way down the trunk.
Pat wants to know about young shrubs that were broken, maybe not by ice, but by heavy snow over this winter. They have a fringe tree that was 4 feet tall and is now broken down to almost nothing. Will it survive?
You know what? It probably will. There's usually enough goodness to get the branches growing. It would be like if this pagoda dogwood here, snapped off here, it would sprout from the base. A lot of shrubs have that ability. If they're a tree form, then you're probably going to end up with a shrub form. The other thing you need to watch out for is if the tree is grafted. So a lot of apple trees, a lot of fruit trees will have been eaten by the rabbits this year. And if the trunk has been girdled and it starts to sprout from the base, it's not going to be the variety of apple that you planted. It will be the rootstock, which yes is an apple, but not a good eating apple usually just a good growing apple. So it's kind of a useless thing to keep. Same thing with, it could be anything. There's lots of trees that are grafted for propagation purposes. It makes it easier if they don't root well from cuttings. And grafting, they can grow a lot quicker. Um, so if you know the tree has been grafted, you'll see a little notch at the base of the tree where the roots and the trunk sort of meet up. If they sprout from below that, get rid of it. It's not going to be the tree you planted, so it's not worth keeping.
And on that same note, what about roses at this time of year? Speaking of that,
Roses, the rabbits loved our roses this year. So our roses are at the same boat. Right now, we're just watching them. We're waiting to see where the roses start to bud out from, and then we'll cut them back to just above those branches. Again, many roses, hybrid teas, grandifloras, floribundas, are grafted onto a different rootstock. So be careful, watch where your roses are shooting from. Rootstock stems are usually very, very vigorous and have more leaflets on the leaves than the bush you started with. Now, a lot of landscape roses now and shrub roses are being grown by cuttings, and they're called own root roses. With those plants, the roots are the same as the stems. You can cut them back really heavy, and everything that comes up will be the variety you started with. So that's a bonus there. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. It might be nice and sunny, but it's awfully chilly. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.